Hello, folks. Those who are here, those who are listening to the recording. Today, I thought we would talk about queuing strategies. And in particular, I wanted to talk about the bus stop method. So this is a teaching or queuing strategy that is commonly used in the accessible yoga community. But I think it's useful for everyone, regardless of who you're teaching, particularly for those all levels drop-in yoga classes where you could have everyone from first time yoga students to people who come to your class every week. It's really helpful for providing really clear, manageable steps in an asana or in a flow, teaching regressions, progressions, props, inversions in a way that you're not filling the space with talking, that you're not having to pause the flow in workshop poses, that still allows for a sense of flow, that still gives people some space to explore, but they have all the information and all the versions that they might need to have a safe and super joyful practice. So that's why I think it's a really good method. Today, I hope that we'll have lots of time to workshop some poses together so that you can really take some time to figure out, like, is this a method that works for me? How might I use this? How is this going to be helpful for my teaching practice? And all of this comes from a student mentioning recently that she was frustrated and she was offering a lot of options and she found it was a real challenge to her class management. And I understand that sometimes offering a lot of versions can start to create a lot of talking, can feel like it's interrupting the flow. But like, I want to be clear, flow is not more important than providing the guidance that your students need in order to have a safe and enjoyable practice. So yes, when we're teaching something like vinyasa flow, we want there to be a sense of flow and pace and rhythm, but not at the expense of students having the information that they need to practice, right? So this is all about how we're going to provide the regressions, progressions, props, inversions without filling the space with talking or constantly stopping the flow of the class to workshop a pose. We just don't have time to really workshop every pose, but the bus stop method gives us the opportunity to give people lots of options. And I first heard about this teaching strategy from one of our grads, Robin Lewis. She's a Canberra-based teacher. She teaches a chair yoga teacher training, if you're interested in that. And since she mentioned that on course, I've learned a little bit more about how the strategy works. And again, not just for accessible specific classes, but for all yoga classes. So in simple terms, here's how the bus stop method works. Imagine everyone's on a bus. We're all on a bus together, but we're not all going to the same location. So people get off the bus when it reaches the place that they want to be today, right? So imagine the same when we're teaching a pose. People can get off the bus at the point of the pose where they want to explore whatever version matches their ability, their needs, their goals, or just an interesting version that they want to give a try to today. So for example, think about something like side angle pose. Bus stop 1 might be forearm on the thigh. Bus stop 2 might be hand down to a brick. Bus stop 3 might be hand to the ground. Bus stop 4 might be taking the bind, right? And so in this way, you can introduce this concept at the start of class, which could be your theme. And then you can just call out bus stops as they come along, right? And this is a really simple way to make classes more accessible, more inclusive, without having to pause a lot and introduce a lot of options and versions, right? Everyone's flowing from the same place. We all got on the bus, but people are going to be choosing to get off at the stop that's right for them, right? And to me, one of the great benefits of this method is that it takes the implied value or hierarchy of poses away, right? So, you know, the full expression of the pose or the advanced version or the basic version. It just allows people to go on a journey that's right for their body today without that implied, oh, you're doing it with a brick, loser. I'm doing it with a bind, right? We get to strip all that away. Every pose is equal, right? Yeah, eyes on your own mat, work with where your body's at today. All these are really important principles in yoga. But you've invited a bunch of humans into a class who are competitive, who have maybe never experienced moving their body or being in their body in a way that they get to make choices, right? Like, that isn't about a performance. It isn't about being the best. It isn't about being competitive. It isn't about doing what everyone else is doing. And that can take time. That can take training and education for people to understand that this, like, literally, you can choose to lie down for the whole yoga class. Like, you can do that. That's cool. Like, and it's hard for some folks, especially people who come from a performance or competition background, to even know that listening to your body and following its guidance is a thing, and to not keep pushing yourself. So I really like this kind of teaching strategy as a way to not just give people options, but to educate people about, like, what's the process of listening to your body and then making a choice based on what you're hearing from your body, right? And that could be a big part of someone's yoga journey, is just being able to engage in that process, right? And we might have to do some educating around that. Like, what does it mean to listen to your body? What does it mean? What signs do I look for that maybe this is not the option for me? Do I look at my breath? Do I feel for tension? Do I look at my technique, right? So those are all points that you might do some educating with your students, right? Because for the most part, the majority of yoga teachers are going to be teaching a lot of all levels drop-in classes. So again, you've got a total beginner, someone who's never practiced yoga before, and you've got really experienced yogis who come to your class every week, and you've got to somehow find a way to teach to those two and then everybody in between. And it's challenging, right? So that's why I think that using strategies like the bus stop's helpful, so that each student can get off the bus at the stop that matches their current ability or their current energy level or their current, wish for why they came to practice today, right? And so we can guide students through progressive variations, starting from a simpler form and gradually moving to more complex versions. And then students get off the bus at the point that they feel, what are we going to call it? Comfortable and challenged, but not overwhelmed, right? So finding some language around that you're going to describe to your students. So essentially, again, let me map out how the bus stop works. We're going to teach an introductory or basic version of the pose that's suitable for your beginners or for people with limited flexibility or limited strength. Then you're going to cue or demo progressively more complex or challenging variations of the pose. So each one building on the previous one. So we've taught the basic pose. Students understand the essence of the pose. And then we can be building and students can be hopping off. And when the last person hops off the bus, we've reached the end of the line. I don't have to offer any more bus stops today. Everyone's found their bus stop and they're exploring their location, right? A really big part of the bus stop method is, like Megs was saying, encouraging students to listen to their bodies and stop at the variation that feels right for them. So even for students who are looking for a challenge, sure, be challenged, but not in pain, not in discomfort. And again, this is where education is important, teaching students to pay attention to their bodies. What does their breath feel like when they're in a happy pose versus an unhappy pose, right? When they've gone beyond what their body's capable of today. Where do we look for places of tension that might indicate we've maybe chosen the wrong bus stop today, or maybe we need to dial it back, like jaw, forehead, right? to educate students on when they're losing technique or beginning to struggle. So again, introducing the essence of a pose, and maybe speaking to students about what does it look like if you've kind of gone beyond, right? Every week, all that education starts to add up. Students really start to understand what to look for and how to communicate with their bodies in that way. And then we want to reinforce this, right? So providing those refining cues and adjustments to help students continue to refine their alignment, continue to refine their postures, and to find ways to safely be challenged, to safely explore their practice as they progress through variations. And again, a big part of that is not assigning value to any particular version, either overtly, so in your cues, oh, the full expression of the pose, or subtly. For instance, if you as a teacher never use a prop, if you always demonstrate the most complex version, that's subtly telling students that there's a right way to do yoga and the less complex versions aren't it, right? So as a teacher, you can be saying like, this is the bus stop I'm going to stay at today, forearm on the thigh. If you want to add on, you could bring your hand down to a brick, down to the ground, etc. And you can gesture to those, but stay in a simpler form of the pose. And I think that encourages students to look at all the poses as being kind of equal or more equal. Yeah, sometimes it's not just about making an adjustment to our physical posture. It might be about making an adjustment to pace. And I think that that's an interesting thing to consider. Sometimes slowing down the pace gives our students a chance to feel on the way in, rather than getting into a pose and then doing a body scan and going, oh, something hurts here. We can take that little bit of time to enter into a pose that students can feel on the way there and go, oh, here's that knee twinge starting to come. What if I pull back just a little bit? There's my sweet spot. I'm challenged, but I'm not in pain. And this is a place where I can be exploring. There's something to be said for naming things. This isn't just a general observation. There's something to be said for naming things and for giving it memorable names that helps us, especially when for some of you have just started your studies. And am I aware of the absolute massive quantity of material I give you for your studies? Yes, I am. And part of it comes from my own learning journey, that back in the old days, we weren't provided with a lot of information. We weren't taught any teaching methodology. We weren't taught any class management. Like there was no structure to teacher trainings in the olden days. It's just like you went in and you did yoga and you sat around and you like talked about your feelings. And like my peers graduated from teacher training having had great experiences at yoga teacher training, but not a lot of strategies, not a lot of skills, and zero confidence to go out in the world and share what they had. And so that's why it's really important for me to give you lots of strategies, lots of information, and hopefully set you up with a solid foundation that you know you can hold space for yourself as a teacher, so that you can hold space for your students, right? That's where confidence is going to come from. So that's why I bombard you with information, but it's for a reason. I give things names because it makes it easier for you all to remember that, oh, that's this method or this strategy. Management trouble or your students need your support, you can go, this is where I could employ that strategy. The benefits I want to say for this particular method are, it creates a lot more inclusivity in your class. So it allows students of all levels to participate in the same class without feeling like, oh, I'm not yogi enough. Everyone else is doing this other thing, and here I am doing this thing, right? They're not going to feel left behind. They're not going to feel like For some students, they can get to feeling like they're holding back more advanced students if they're doing a regressed version of a pose. And when we've got bus stops, everyone gets to choose what version they want to play with. It helps students to personalize and own their practice. So when students make their own choices about how they're going to move their body, they are more empowered to choose how to move their body in other places in their life and to choose to practice yoga outside the studio. If my
Yeah.
students feel like they can only practice yoga with my guidance, with my eye on them, telling them what to do, are they going to be likely to take their practice home and feel confident to roll out the mat and do some sun salutations? They aren't. They're going to be less likely to do that. So when I can empower students to make choices on the mat when we're together, I know they're going to be more empowered to make choices on the mat when we're not together, right? And
Totally.
that's really important to me as a teacher. Um, and another great thing about this, especially for people who like to see their progress in yoga, they'll be able to clearly see the progress they're making in strength, flexibility, balance, etc., when they understand bus stops. So they go, oh, I used to have to get off this one bus stop, and now I can go to this other bus stop, right?
Yeah.
I built up
Yeah.
my strength enough. I built up my flexibility enough. I can balance well enough. It's going to help build their confidence and having confidence in our bodies, knowing what our bodies are capable of, enjoying the strength we have, enjoying our flexibility, testing out our balance. Those are all really great for building body confidence in our students, right? And then
All right.
obviously the other benefit is safety. So like handing the reins over to the students to choose safe options, they know their bodies best. I can't look at a room and know that someone's knee is twinging in a pose. So why shouldn't it be the student to make that choice for safety and comfort, right? As opposed to me. Yoga is such an amazing tool to maintain a healthy body, but it doesn't prevent you from getting injured, from having illness, from having disability, from having chronic pain. So there may be times where you're going to be, and some yoga teachers come to yoga with pain or disability or injury. And it doesn't mean they can't teach all the bus stops. It might just mean they stop at an earlier stop in their demonstrating. We're going to teach a basic pose or a foundational pose that teaches the essence of the technique. And then we're going to offer some bus stops. And you don't have to offer every bus stop. Offer bus stops that are appropriate to this group of people and their abilities, their needs, their goals, maybe what works for your theme or your sequence for today. And invite students to explore. Remember that a really big part of the bus stop method is to encourage students to self-assess and to have the confidence to make choices, not just the confidence to make choices about more complex versions, but also the confidence to make choices about less complex versions or having more support in a pose. So choosing child's pose instead of down dog. As you get to know your students, you do start to develop an understanding of what they might be capable of, right? And if they're starting to develop some ideas about what they might be capable of, but they're a little bit tentative to go there, you can, this is not going to sound good, but trick them. So let's take the example of side angle. If someone's been working on their forearm, and side angle is a place where it's relatively safe to be exploring deeper, you can try and go, nope, my hand doesn't go there. I'm going to go back here, right? If someone feels that they're trapped with their forearm on their thigh and they don't know how to go further, you can trick them with things like take their hands away. So if their mental block is taking their forearm from the thigh and putting it on the ground, do a high release version. So you're coming into side angle with your arms extended, and then you might play with lunging in and lunging out and finding an angle of the knee that can then allow for the hand to come to the ground, right? So if their block is making the journey from a bent arm on the thigh with support to a brick on the ground, don't make that journey, go another route. So from arms up to hand on the ground, or hand on the wall and walking the hand down the wall, right? Sometimes, even in our own practice, we can feel that there's an obstacle in one path, and so we can just take a different path. Does that make sense? Yeah. Just to reiterate, your students don't have to do more complex versions, but if your students want to do a more complex version, but they can't figure out how to get there, then give them alternative routes, right? Another example of that is like a much more challenging pose, upward bow, the full back bend. On your mat, in the middle of the room, a full back bend can be a real psychological challenge as well as a physical challenge. You might have progressed through bridge variations. You might have done dinner plate hands. You might have done all kinds of things that develop us for upward bow. But being on your mat in the middle of the room for some students is just too big a psychological challenge. And just moving their mat to the wall can be the thing. Like simply changing location, being near a wall, I can't stress enough, is so comforting and confidence boosting for many students. So that's another way that you can, like, I'm not changing anything about this person's abilities. I'm not changing anything about the pose. I'm just taking another path there by changing location, right? And giving them a location that feels safe and grounded, right? For them to make a choice to try a pose. Not for, you don't want to be forcing students. You don't want to say, "Oh no, you can do it." If the student's going, "I can't do it," like, believe them. But that change of location can be the support they need to try a thing they've been wanting to try. One of the things that's really useful about having yoga friends is you've got techniques that you've experienced in class or that you've innovated that really work for you, but they don't work for everybody. And you've got a yoga friend who has different techniques that worked for them or that they learned in class that are going to fill the gaps in techniques and strategies you're offering your students. So having yoga friends to talk to about teaching strategies, about class management strategies, about prop strategies are really so useful because we only have our perspective, right? Which is limited, our yoga experience, our perspective, what we've experienced. All of that's great, but it is limited. When we open up to hearing from our yoga friends, their ideas and experiences, it expands that perspective and it fills our teaching toolbox with more tools than we might have developed on our own. So I love having these group coaching sessions with you. I hope that in some ways you're complementing this with also going to classes or watching videos or talking to other yogis or yoga teachers, sharing discussions on social media to keep learning and filling your teaching toolbox and hearing different perspectives. If you've always been, I'm not going to run over time, but let me just say this. If you've always been in a short body or a round body or a long-armed body, to those of you with short arms, I'm a T-Rex as well, you don't know what it's like to have the opposite, to be in a tall body or to be in a long-armed body or a long-legged body. And so hearing how other people strategize with the body that they've got to explore poses, so incredibly useful. So get out there and get talking to people. That is all for today. Thank you for listening to my many tangents and rants. Thank you for being here. To those of you who are here live, I appreciate you so much. Hello to those of you listening to the recording. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you.